verse 17. Verse 17 says, "Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary of thee, and so hate thee." Pretty simple verse here. Just be careful about inviting yourself over too much to somebody else's residence. You especially don't want to just keep doing that over and over again. You eventually wear your welcome out, basically. Sure, it's good to have some friends. It's good to have healthy to have some fellowship sometimes. Remember the day that this was written, there wasn't a lot of travel. It wasn't easy to just get in your car and travel 15 miles, right? And so if you had a little group of farmhouses, you had a little group of some residences, it might be easy to just every single night, hey, yeah, I'm going to so-and-so's house. It's, a 30-second walk this way or whatever. And that would get to be irritating at some point. Familiarity is going to breed contempt. That's what the saying is. And so they're just saying, be careful about wearing out your welcome. Be wise about that for sure. Verse 18, it says, "A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow." He's a danger and he's a painful thing. Okay? What is a maul? Well, Google says that a maul was a tool with a heavy head and a handle used for tasks like ramming, crushing, or driving wedges. Sort of like a big club or a hammer, maybe somewhere in between the two, a club and a hammer, right? So if you go, and of course in court, or you're just in the court of public opinion, you're going to slander somebody. If you go onto social media and you talk somebody else down, you're criticizing them, and of course maybe you're lying. Maybe you're breathing a falsehood about this person. And this is just giving really strong language. You are a sword in that person's side. Understand what you're doing. And you're like a sharp arrow. What's a sharp arrow do? It pierces them and kills them, okay? It destroys something. It brings death to something. It's not good. It's not right either. It's vicious. He's just saying that would be a dangerous person that would do that. So, of course, let's be edifying to other people. Let's always be honest. Let's make sure we don't backbite and stab people in the back and so forth. It's always going to come back to haunt you. Never going to be something that God blesses, of course. He's saying that's just a wise principle to keep in mind. Be honest with other people. Verse 19, "Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint." So Solomon really wants to express here how frustrating and even painful it just grates on you. It's like, the fingernails on the chalkboard, proverbially, right? It just makes you feel helpless, very much out of luck. When you've got a worker or an employee, maybe a helper assigned to your ministry or something, and they just don't listen to you, they don't end up coming through in a day of difficulty or a day of trouble. So maybe here there was an imminent attack. Maybe there was a drought or a famine. Maybe there was a plague. Just something troublesome, something difficult. It's already weighing on the leader. It's already difficult. It's already weighing you down or being a pain to you. And it really makes you feel up a creek without a paddle when you got somebody, they don't come through when you send them on a job. I remember when we've been in the hospital with Ray Lynn, it does really mean so much to have somebody who just drops by. Somebody who just comes and makes a call real quick and just said, "Hey, have you had dinner? We got you some Chipotle." How much of a help it can be, when I can't be there. When I can't be here, when these men will step up, just like on Wednesday night, somebody's stepping up and he's going to grace us, make sure that there's still a sermon. And they work hard to have good, faithful preaching in my absence. That means the world to me, right? Maybe you've been through a difficult time. Having somebody there to get some different things done in your absence, boy, it's a breath of fresh air, isn't it? And so he's rejoicing in that breath of fresh air, but he's also saying, the opposite is true also. He says it feels like a broken tooth. What that made me think of was I was 9 years old. Our church had a picnic or a get-together, and we decided to play softball. I already loved softball, even at 9 years old. Obviously, it was very tough for me. I was a little bit on the scrawny side. Well, I was a little overweight, but I was probably short for my age. But I love getting a bat, swinging at that ball. Man, there was nothing more fun for me than getting out there playing softball. So here I am, 9 years old, and I swing and I miss. And that's the third one, and so they're like, "All right, buddy, you're out, sorry." And man, I was sad, and so I have my head down, you're walking this direction. I think the dugout was this direction. And I was frustrated. You hang your head down, because you're bummed out. You're a little kid. You can't swing fast enough to get. I haven't had enough practice. The time is right, And I had no idea this was not smart what I was doing. Okay, just walking from right there to right here, and I lift my head up and bam! Somebody hits me in the face hard, really hard. Now I know, because I've watched baseball now on TV. What's over here? That's the on deck circle, right? And so I guess this guy, he wasn't watching for me, but he's making sure he's all warmed up with his practice swing. Didn't think to watch and make sure I was there. You remember this happened probably? You did? Yes, for sure. So I get smacked like really, really hard. It doesn't actually knock my tooth out. It just broke it. You hit a baseball bat. That's pretty amazing. You walk away with no actual teeth lost, just a broken one, right? But it's right in the middle, right in the front, right here, okay? This one to my right. And so about half of it's broken off, and so somebody digs in the dust, and they found the piece that was broken, and they gave it to my parents. And so they got me to the dentist, of course, that week, and it's tough because there's a nerve, obviously, in there. This was a grown-up tooth. What do you call it? A second tooth, a mature tooth, or something. What do they call it? Permanent. Your permanent tooth, right? Your grown-up tooth. So now it's sensitive to cold. And so it's a problem when I eat, it's a pain, and they couldn't use the piece. They had to put something over, they have to make the form. This is back, I'm 9 years old, 1993. And so they had like some kind of a synthetic thing that would fit over it and supposed to stick to it and stay secure. And they're like, look, this you can't just act like it's gonna take care of everything. You can't eat apples, okay? You want to eat an apple? I had to chop it up, and use my back teeth. To bite into that. And they were like, watch out for pizza. Be careful with pizza, and some other things like that. Tell them a little 9-year-old, be careful with pizza, But again, that piece really became a pain in my life. I was in Kentucky one time. We were just playing catch. And so softball, just kind of bounces off my glove and just bam, hits me right there. Tooth knocked out. That piece that they had on there is gone. One time I was eating pizza. And next thing I know, it's just gone. I'm like, where did my piece on my tooth go? Good night. This is pizza. There's nothing sacred, right? So, look, having a broken tooth was really frustrating. It was painful. It was irritating. It was temperature sensitive. You just feel like it's pretty near never going to be fixed. And so eventually, again, when it gets knocked out, when people want you to take pictures, you go like this, and you're always like, if I had that picture on my desk, it's like, Mom, do you have some whiteout? I'm like, add a little, now it's Photoshop, but I'm going to Photoshop this manually here and make it look like I've got a tooth. And it was frustrating, very, very frustrating. So that's how it is, he says. You're going to put your trust in somebody, and they don't come through in your dark day. A foot out of joint. Anybody testify on that one? Probably several of you. I know my wife, when we lived in Missouri, she was moving a big trash can, and she stepped in a hole, and she wound up having a hairline fracture from that near her ankle, and it was painful for weeks for her. She had to get a boot, and she had to keep wearing that boot and just wearing that boot. It was a pain. It was limiting, right? The wise man is saying these things, these limits you. You have a big group of workers, and man, they're all going out and getting the job done. Man, I feel like I can do all kinds of stuff, right? If this worker, he's not getting it done, right? And so that's what you feel like. It's limiting in a painful way. You don't have the support that you thought you had. So what's the moral? Look, be a friend in need, right? Be faithful. When those around you are going through a tough time, think about them. Hey, take them some flowers. Take them a basket to that person who's in the hospital, recovering from surgery or something. A friend in need is a friend indeed, and that's a benefit. It's a blessing when you have a friend in need like that. Verse number 20. As he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, and as vinegar upon nitre, so is he that singeth songs to an heavy heart. So first we have cruelty, taking away somebody's coat when they're out in the cold. Well, that would just be an unseemly thing to do, right? How inhumane can you be? And then it says here, vinegar upon nitre. Nitre would have been some form of sodium bicarbonate used for cleaning, maybe bleaching fabrics, mostly cleaning. very similar to baking soda. Probably what we have today would be the closest thing. And a lot of people are probably familiar with this. That's a cleaning method. I know when our stove will get, stuck with, the heat that sometimes can make your debris and your dirt on top of your stove get all stuck. My wife will say, well, get some baking soda out. And so we'll spread the baking soda over first, and then you bring the vinegar and you put it on there. And of course, what happens? It starts reacting, it foams up. It's not peaceful, it's eruptive. It melts the baking soda away. Okay, I think that might be the idea here. After a little while, it looks like there's water there. You don't see baking soda anymore. So that's what he says it's like, singing songs to a heavy heart. So somebody's grieving. Somebody's mourning. Again, somebody's having a bad day. And you ask me why I'm happy. Oh, I'll just tell you why. Because my sins are gone. And they're just going, get away from me, man. What are you doing, right? It says, even if it's just too early in the morning, and they're grumpy, that can be a frustrating thing, right? But when somebody's actually mourning a serious loss, it's not just annoying. It can really hurt. It can really, maybe you remember King Darius in Daniel chapter 6. He developed this relationship with Daniel. He had a very close. He loved this guy. He thought this guy was great. Well, of course, they threw him in the den of lions, and the king wasn't sure how things were going to play out. So the Bible says he had no instruments of music to be brought before him throughout that night. It's saying that it can melt you, like we said, with the baking soda. It can rip through you in an eruptive dissolving. And so, of course, we learn to have discernment, and we try to do as it says in Romans 12. It says, rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Good, happy music is powerful. I'm all for it. It's wonderful. It's a healthy thing, no question. But everything has its time, right? There's a time of mourning. What does it say in Ecclesiastes 3? Time of mourning and a time to dance. A time to weep and a time to laugh, right? And so you got to be sensitive to the people around you and what their needs are. Make sure you're not singing or playing it for somebody that's in serious mourning. He says that's not a wise thing. And learn how to treat people. Verse 21. If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink, for thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. Interestingly, this is quoted also in Romans chapter 12, which we just referenced. I think it's almost automatic to ask here, is this saying, well, you're going to heap coals of fire on their head, as in that's going to hurt them? No, that's going to teach them a lesson, or that's going to, vindicate you or something. Or is it saying this is something that would have done them a favor, right? Is this scratching their backs in some way that this is referring to? Well, I found a great verse that goes along with this. If you would, flip over to Exodus chapter 23, please. Exodus chapter 23. And I love this verse. But he says here, you're going to be heaping coals of fire on another person's head, your enemy, by being good to them, by serving them, or noting their needs and helping to take care of their needs. You turn to Exodus chapter 23. But what the commentators say with that is likely a reference to people in this society when they had metals known to be impure. What you would do is you would heap coals of fire on top of said metals. And if you could, you would have coals of fire underneath them first. You would have coals of fire there. You would take the metals that you're trying to, take care of, and then you would heap coals of fire on top of them. And before long, it would melt the impurities of the metals so that you could make something out of them. So, yes, the idea is basically killing them with kindness. By being kind, by helping meet the needs of your enemies, you might be able to get them to come around and see the light, see that you're a nice person, see that you're not vindictive and so forth. And this is something that needs to be said sometimes among Christian, families and Christians that get frustrated with each other and they haven't talked to each other in, a certain amount of time, in years or something. And it's nice when there's a killing them with kindness that happens over and over again. Eventually you melt the heart of stone. Who's ever heard that phrase, right? That's the idea here. You have these rocks or minerals or something, and you can make something out of them, but in the form that they are right now, it's not going to work out. So you pile up some hot coals upon them. And so helping meet the needs of our enemies, we might get them to come around and see the light, or at least, very least, we can have a clear conscience, and we can be blameless when we stand before the Lord. So we look for the needs of our enemies. We're sensitive to those needs. We try to meet or provide for them in some way, or be good to our enemies in some way. That is obeying this scripture right here. The Bible says that's a wise way to live. Exodus 23. This is the concise version of the Mosaic law. I want you to look down at me in verse number 4. If thou meet thine enemy's ox or his ass going astray, thou shalt surely bring it back to him again. Brother Bill likes to talk about, this is kind of like your tractor now, right? That's what you use oxen for back then. And so imagine if your tractor, something broke with the brakes, and it starts rolling away, and your neighbor goes out and grabs it and, hits the brakes and turns it on and drives it back to you, okay? Kind of like that. He says, if that's your enemy and you see, his donkey, his camel's just wandering off, well, you go over there and you grab the rope on that camel and you get it back to your neighbor. Maybe that's your enemy. Maybe you're frustrated with how he treated somebody. Maybe you're in a scuffle. Maybe it's Hatfields versus McCoy's or something. And he says, doesn't matter. Go get his camel. Go get his donkey that fell down into that ravine and help it out and get it back to him. That's the way you treat people. Verse 5, if thou see the ass of him that hateth thee lying under his burden. I love this. And wouldest forbear to help him, thou shalt surely help him. So the Bible, the Bible references, sometimes you see somebody and there's an angst, there's a Hatfield McCoy's going on between you. It's very natural, very human thing to say, let that donkey keep on walking. That'll give him a nice fun day there. I don't care. We can be vindictive automatically like that. But he says, look, that's not what you should do. And a lot of people will try to tell you that in the Old Testament, you were just supposed to despise your enemies and resist them. Maybe go to war with them and just kill them if you can. That was the Old Testament rules and mindset. But when you get to the New Testament, it's like, okay, now we're supposed to love our enemies. But the truth is, loving your enemies is an Old Testament concept. Did you notice that? That's what this says. The children of Israel were commanded to help their enemies when they needed it. That was supposed to create an effect of peace and people not starting all the more and more feuds with Hatfields and McCoys, right? And so let's get back to Proverbs chapter 25 now, if you would. We'll jump back to Proverbs chapter 25. But just all throughout the Bible, you have that command. Hey, be good by your enemies. Love your enemies. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, listen to what Jesus did say. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. Notice, he didn't say it is written. Okay? He didn't say, thus saith the Lord. It's okay to hate your enemy. God never said that. Okay? So he's just saying, look, in your society, in your culture, you have heard it be said, let's love our friends and hate our enemies. But, I think there's a few people that get confused right there. That, that's somewhere in the Bible. But it's not in the Bible, right? Maybe you've heard it said, hate the sin, love the sinner. That's not in the Bible. There's lots of other stuff right there. We can go on and on. But no, it doesn't say in the Old Testament, just go ahead and hate your enemy. You find a way to kill him, go ahead and kill him. No, look at all the mourning that happened. When somebody like Abner got killed by one of David's servants. And David just mourns and weeps. It's like, man, 10 days ago, that guy, had a price on your head, David. But David says, no. He came, with a white flag and said, I want to join the whole kingdom together. And just like that, David said, come on in. Water's fine. Let's be friends. Let's let bygones be bygones. And that's after, what happened with we could get off on all that. The battles, 20 men died, and 140 men died on this side, and all of that. But he says, let's forget about that. Let's be friends. Let's be allies. And let's love our enemies. And so we aren't told to hate our enemies anywhere in the Bible. That's just something that some people around the time of Christ may have said. God didn't say that. And so we should, of course, love our enemies. Verse 23, the north wind driveth away rain, so doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue. I think you can start to see a pattern here, a theme in this chapter. There would be a well-known fact, and then he says, let's attach to your mind a principle, a wisdom principle to go with this well-known fact. Now, all the commentators are pretty much in agreement here that if you were in Jerusalem, you lived in Jerusalem, a north wind or a northwest wind would bring rain. So I think what he's saying here is that a north wind drives rain. It basically brings rain, okay? It might sound on the surface like he's saying it sends it away. He's actually saying it brings it. Because you see the rest of the verse. So doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue. He's not saying an angry countenance pushes away a backbiting tongue. Okay? And it's actually, I think it might be flipped around here. This is one of those, you've been reading in your Bible. Sometimes the subject comes later. Okay? That's probably what it is saying here. That a backbiting tongue is what brings an angry countenance. Okay? So I don't want to bring somebody up here, but picture, here's another person, right? I'm backbiting him. It's going to bring an angry countenance in him, right? Not necessarily the other way around. So I think you understand what we're saying right there. I remember, I put a bunch of stuff in here that I skipped over. Oh, well. Annotated commentary is the one that gives the idea. It's probably switched around. It's saying that a backbite, probably sounds like I'm massaging this verse a whole lot, but that's the way I understand this verse. He's saying that if you have a friend, maybe you have a spouse, maybe you have a boss, why do they get an angry countenance at you? Well, what do you say about them behind closed doors? Are you talking about them? Are you criticizing them? Maybe backbiting with your tongue? I think that's basically, slandering, maybe a critical tongue. If you're bad-mouthing somebody else, well, that's not the way to get on their good graces, okay? It's not a good way to make them happy. It's not the way to build a great relationship with them. So that's what we need to be careful about. We don't backbite. We don't badmouth other people. We have a good relationship with people. We have confidence in people. We have faith in people. All right, verse number 24. It is better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Time to hit it again. This is the third time he's hit this, and it's been a couple chapters. But this is a very simple admonition to the ladies. Don't get into brawling with your husband or the man of the house. Brawl would be like a huge fight. That's not hard, is it? Because if you do get into huge fights with your husband, he just wants to get away from you. That's what this is saying. On the corner of the housetop, there aren't going to be any comforts, right? There's no food buffet up there. There's no heat in the wintertime if you're up on the housetop. There probably wasn't even a chair to sit on. But Solomon says, look, that's just a better, nicer existence up there than if you got to be inside. Maybe even it's a big house. It's a beautiful house. You got all the food in the world. You got all the clothes and all of the heat in the wintertime and in the summertime, ventilation or fans or whatever. That's all the places where we built all the comforts. But he said, it's a place you don't want to be if there's a woman that's brawling with you, in a big fight. So learn to get along with your spouse. Big fights are not normal, and they're not wise. Let's not normalize them for the next generation, for sure. Verse 25, as cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. Now, how many of you you get drinking water, you want it cold. You want ice in your water. How many of you like that? That's me, okay? My wife is just like, give it to me lukewarm. Now, I've read somewhere that lukewarm can be healthier because you might drink more, okay? You get a glass of ice-cold water and you start drinking, your body says, hold on a second, let me, and then you set it down and you forget about it or something, right? So maybe she's just being healthy, I don't know. But I tend to side with this verse. When I'm thirsty, I want cold water, right? And so, but he's just, it's refreshing. You get a glass of cold water. It's so, oh man, it feels good on your throat. And so the parallel that Solomon says is getting news from far away. Now, I think this is a little different in our culture today because we are just inundated with news. We're about newsed out, This is saying, good news, bad news. We hear bad news all the time. We hear good news all the time. If they do have a half an hour of bad news to give you, then they finish out with what? A dog on a bicycle or something, to try to, hey, let's all have a happy, fluffy, yay feeling or something at the end of the news. But look, we have channels that are nothing but news all the time. We have channels that are something else, like talk or Christian music or something. But at the top of the hour, hey, we got to make sure you hear the news. We don't want you to be uninformed because you're listening to our broadcast, right? And so, but just news. Man, you can even have, news on your slave device on demand anytime you want it. I mean, your phone, of course, that's what I'm saying. But we're about newsed out. Understand, in this culture, that was different. You didn't get fresh news very often. Okay, you didn't get, here comes, a messenger from the next town over. I mean, that might happen once in 5 days or something, right? That didn't happen very often. And so he said, that is just a pearl of wisdom here to let you know that you send somebody good news. And so I think one thing he's doing is don't withhold good news from other people, okay? If you got good news, you got a good report. Hey, we heard about people getting saved and people spoke up about it tonight. That's what we're talking about right here. Hey, can you get it on a text message and share that with somebody? I got people on my feed on Facebook sometimes. They get on there, hey, this is a picture of so-and-so. I met them on the street today, and we were talking, and I got to talking about the gospel. They got saved. Why don't you rejoice with me? I love seeing that stuff in my feed, don't you? Hey, he's saying here, don't withhold good news when you got it. Make sure you get it to the people who would appreciate it, and that'll brighten their day. It's just nice to somebody, like giving them a glass of water that's cold while they're thirsty. It's nice to be able to do that for somebody. It's refreshing. Let's refresh other people with the good news that we have. Verse 26, a righteous man falling down before the wicked is as a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring. Now back then, a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring is a bad thing. They would tell their kids to stay away from it. You got murky water bubbling up, and you don't want your kids around that they're going to get sick or something, right? And I think falling down here, we might say like falter, be defeated by, maybe even be overcome by. Okay. One commentator gave 4 Bible examples here. He said, what a blemish it was for Abraham to fall under the reproof of Abimelech. So he's saying, Abimelech will be a wicked man, probably wasn't saved. I don't know. Abimelech might have been saved. I read the story and I'm like, this guy might have been, a godly, not a godly person, but he might have been saved. I don't know. But, that's an interesting point. He says, for Solomon to be taken by the Philistines in a house of fornication. The latter makes more sense, I think, with the verse, though Samson was hardly a righteous man. But it was a time when, the man who had all sorts of potential to be used by God and had been used of God greatly was caught and defeated by wicked people because of his fornication. How sad is that? Okay? I wouldn't want my kids hanging out with Samson very much and learning his ways, right? It's a troubled fountain, a corrupt spring. The other 2 that he gave were Josiah reproved of his duty by Pharaoh Necho, and Peter being drawn by a silly wench to deny his master. Anyways, Samson was defeated. He was taken captive by wicked people. So if you've ever been in a place where you need water, maybe you can hear it in the distance, you're really thirsty, you're traveling somewhere, and you think, praise the Lord, I'm saved, only to come closer to the water and find that it's murky. It looks corrupt and polluted and dirty. You sort of don't know what to do. If I don't drink any of it, I could die before I find other water source. But, if I do drink it, I might get sick and perhaps even die. It's really frustrating, right? It's a scary thing. So that's what he's saying here. To somebody who's wanting to do the right thing, it's confusing. It leaves you with unanswered questions. And it's the same with people who are pretty much righteous people and they get caught up with sin that maybe disqualifies them in some way, the right way for all to see. It becomes murky and very disappointing. This reminded me of, I remember very well, the scandal coming out involving the pastor there at the church we had attended for years, First Baptist Church in Hammond. About 2011 is when this took place. The pastor was found to be having an illicit relationship with a 16, 17-year-old girl. We weren't attending there at the time anymore, but we were going there for conferences, watching online for conferences when we had the opportunity. I was recommending his books. I read his book on dating before I started dating my wife, right? It really starts to mess with you. You think, how many sermons have I been listening to and amening and supporting while you've been doing things like this behind closed doors? It turned out this had been going on for, I think, a little more than a month before it came out. But I thought of one sermon that turned out very different. You hear these guys preaching and sometimes they use the same illustrations and so forth. Well, I heard this sermon. This time his illustration went farther, than it usually does when I heard it before. It messes with you, no question. I remember very clearly the pastor down in Memphis, Brother Bachman, saying to me that he planned to keep on reading his books. He said, truth is truth. That's what he said, right? But obviously he couldn't recommend his books anymore, right? Do you see how transgressions like that, it makes things murky? You feel like there might be a corrupt spring that I'm drinking from here. And, obviously, I shudder to think how many people in that church of thousands became disenchanted with all preachers, with all men of God, or just with all churches, or with the Bible or something, right? And just stopped reading the Bible or stopped going to church altogether. We shudder, of course, to think about all the damage that was done as somebody that we looked up to as a great man of God, had to stand before the heathen, as it says in 1 Corinthians 6, and rightfully so, but he had to stand before unrighteous judges on the record and was found guilty and went to prison. That's what this verse made me think of. The aftermath was a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring, and it's sad. But this is an encouragement to all of us to stay righteous before the Lord. so that sort of confusion and disillusionment should not happen to our followers and those over whom we have influence. A lot of wisdom in that verse for sure. Verse 27, it is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search their own glory is not glory. Now we've already covered, my son, eat thou honey. If you find honey, eat so much as is sufficient for thee. It is good to eat some honey. That's healthy. But certainly you could overdo it. And the other passage says, you're likely to vomit it if you do overdo it. And so Solomon, I think he has seen some people who were doing a lot of what they were doing. It's kind of reminding me of Matthew chapter 6, right? The people, Jesus said, these guys, they're praying so that you'll look up to them and say, wow, that guy's a great prayer. That's really the only reason he prays. He doesn't pray because he wants to please God or serve God or something, right? I think that's the idea here. People who do things just so that other people will look up to them. That's their main motivation in a lot of the things that they do. And he says, if somebody is doing things just to get people to look up to them, they're not really even doing it. Those are very empty deeds. There's no glory in that whatsoever. As in, it's not a commendable thing at all. We should do what we do because we fear God and because we love God. We should do what we do because we love people, because we care about one another, because we try and obey the Bible, not because we're hoping other people look up to us. He says if that's the case, at some point all of the sweetness and the healthiness of something like honey can be turned into a bellyache